right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, and thanks for joining us today for the Michigan's new personal financial disclosure training. My name is Heidi Zabik, and I'm the department analyst for the personal financial disclosure section at the Michigan Bureau of Elections. And I'll be starting us off today with a presentation overviewing the requirements of the new personal financial disclosure, or PFD Acts, and the filing process. Joining us today are two of my colleagues here at the Bureau. We've got Bob Burns, Director of the Filing, Disclosure, and Compliance Division, and Alessa Bose, a member of our Regulatory Division, working with us on implementation. But a quick show of hands, put your hand up if you are a public officer. Excellent. Okay, and go ahead, put your hand down. Put your hand up if you're a staffer of a legislator. Okay, and put your hand up if you are a candidate or a campaign manager. Okay. And is anyone, put your hand up if this applies to you, is anyone in the webinar today a candidate only who will be nominated at a state party convention? So that means you're a lieutenant governor candidate, an AG candidate, a secretary of state candidate, or yeah, I think just those. Okay. All right. Just want to make sure that I'm emphasizing certain points for all of our audience members today. So, okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. A little bit of housekeeping first. The information presented today will be recorded and used for additional training purposes on our website. As for how we're going to handle questions, we are not taking verbal questions. Instead, please type them into the chat window at any time during the presentation, and we'll provide answers also in the chat window during the webinar when feasible, but then we're also going to have a Q&A session at the end as well. Keep in mind, too, that this is not the only time that you have to reach out to us, and we know that this is all new to everyone at the same time, and so we are here to help. We will also cut and paste the contact information that you're seeing on this screen into the chat window, and we strongly encourage you to start with our website and the online instruction manual, which between those two may very well likely answer all or most of your questions. This web address on the screen is specific to the PFD section, and I would highly recommend that you bookmark it for future reference. It will help immensely. Today's topics, we're going to cover today the top level overview of the Act's requirements and the process that filers will use to prepare and complete and submit their filings. And then we're going to go into a demonstration of the platforms and launch the software itself. In there, we will go over how to create your login accounts, how to register as a first-time filer, how to complete and certify your forms, and how to submit the forms for public viewing. And then we can go over what happens after you've filed, show you the public viewing page, and address additional expectations or disclosure obligations that you should be aware of. And then we'll do that Q&A. So with that, we'll get started. So the only individuals who are required to file under the new PFD Acts are those public officials who hold one of the offices listed here, as well as the candidates for these same seats. And if you are required to file as both a public officer and a candidate, you will only file one report, and it will be subject to the Public Officer PFD Act. That'll take precedence for those of you who are both a public officer and a candidate. And you are considered a candidate for office under the new PFD Act if you can answer yes to all of these questions. If you are considered a candidate based on the definition in the Michigan Campaign Finance Act, if you are subject to the Michigan Campaign Finance Act, if you are running for any of the listed positions shown here, and your candidate committee received or expended more than $1,000 during the election cycle. So also note that anyone who has a candidate committee, even if they're not on the 2024 ballot, if they raised or spent $1,000 or more between the last day following the election that seat was last on the ballot so that would be November 9th for all of these seats, Wednesday, November 9th. Then if they've raised $1,000, then they have to file, even if they're running in some future election, because their candidate committee is open and active. And so therefore, that's their intent to run in the future. If they've spent $1,000 anytime between the day after the election, they have to file. That may not be known by folks, so keep that in mind. So these are the filing dates that you need to mark on your calendars. They are also available online and in our manual. But for 2024 only, public officers and candidates will have different filing deadlines. The public officers have to file on or before April 15th of this year, but candidates for office have until May 15th to file. But starting in 2025 and every year thereafter, all filings will be due on May 15th of each year. The only exception to this would be if you are a candidate for office who is nominated at your state party convention. So Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, candidates only, not sitting officials. If you are a candidate for office prior to May 15th, then you still file by the normal May 15th deadline. But if you become a candidate for office after May 15th, then you have 15 days from your committee's formation when you file your statement of organization under the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. That triggers a 15-day window for you to file. Per the acts, all filers must use the PFD forms as created by the Department of State, and paper filings cannot be accepted. You will complete all of your needed steps for PFD online inside a new electronic filing system that is called the Michigan Transparency Network, or MiTN as we pronounce it. And MiTN is a web-based software platform. So there's nothing for filers and users to install or download first. The full platform is still under development, and it will be operational in late 2024 and early 2025 for all disclosures that are required under Michigan's campaign finance, lobby, legal defense funds, casino registration, or the new Personal Financial Disclosure Acts. The new PFD filings that you are about to submit are the beginning of this new rollout of MiTN, although I suspect a lot more of you will be extra excited when MiTN replaces MERS. So while MiTN is operational now for this year's filings for PFD only, the full versions that get released in 2025 and beyond, those will integrate across the different disclosure systems, and it'll be a more robust set of features, and we'll have more search and public viewing capabilities as well. So once all modules are fully integrated and released, MiTN will work on any operating system and on all devices. But be aware that the 2024 version that you're working with this year is not going to work on mobile devices, but it should work on just about any browser platform and operating system. So you should be set in that respect. It's just your mobile phones won't work. So the overall 10,000-foot view of what happens to get your PFD filed is you're going to first register your identifying information inside of MiTN, and then you're going to complete and certify each section of the required disclosure report. And there are 12 different sections. You will then review, certify, and submit the complete report on or before 5 p.m. on April 15th or May 15th if you're a candidate. As you get underway with your filings, it's important that everyone accessing the new MiTN system has a clear understanding of their specific role that they are in relation to the filer. So we're going to be getting into the PFD module to explain this more shortly, and Bob is going to step us through this in just a minute. But as he's setting up, it's just really important that you guys understand the difference between a filer and a preparer. Everyone needs to know this distinct role because only a filer can, and they are the candidate or the public officer themselves. And then preparers are everyone else, like an accountant, a staffer, a spouse, another assistant. And as many of you are probably familiar with the campaign finance reporting system and how things sort of work in practice, where often a staffer or a campaign manager or maybe even an outside consultant is doing the filings of the campaign statements for you. That's fine inside of MICFA because the Act allows a treasurer to or their designee to do that. But the Personal Financial Disclosure Acts are very different. They're not under MICFA. And no one can certify or submit the PFD forms on behalf of a filer. The filers need to understand that that is their statutory obligation to certify and submit the reports, and that cannot be reassigned to someone else. So that means that every preparer, and that includes even those of you who've reached out to our office already, and it's sort of obvious that you're logging in as the filer, every preparer needs to have their own separate My Login account to use while assisting their filer. And you can be a preparer for more than one filer. If you have been invited and initiated, that has to be initiated by the filer from their account first. But you've got to have that distinction between the two. Do not share logins, please. So one final slide is before we turn over to Bob. You'll see several different types of fields when you're inside the software. And most of those disclosure fields are mandatory. They're fields that are specifically required by the acts, or they are necessary to ensure that required information can be understood and enforced. There's also some optional fields within MiTN, which are provided in accordance with Sections 1 of both acts. to provide an expectation of transparency on financial matters. Filers are encouraged in Section 1 to provide additional disclosure to inform the public of conflicts of interest or provide information on how they may have resolved any potential conflicts of interest. So while any information that is disclosed has to be accurate, there is no statutory or constitutional requirement that you provide any information into those optional fields. They are clearly marked with a distinct red border around them, and they also have the word optional written right next to them. And then finally, there's a few instances where a field might be required only for a public officer, or maybe it only applies if you have a spouse. So in those cases, and in many of them, the software knows if the field is even required for you. So it may skip over some questions that it's asking someone else in what you see for selections on your screen. Information, depending on how you've typed it in at the beginning, will help to determine what instructions you see right on each form itself. But they're all very clearly marked, and you will see they follow a very distinct pattern. So it's fairly easy to do. So with that, we're going to go ahead I think I'm going to go over really quickly also the My Login. We do encourage you to start out. There's 3 steps that you need to do when you're a first-time user. You need to first start out by reading the manual. So we recommend that you download it, read it, get to know it, and it will answer a lot of your questions. But all users have to have a My Login account to access MiTN. So if you don't have one, you'll need to set that up. My Login is the state of Michigan centralized identity management system that allows users the ability to access a variety of different state services and systems online. And this is across multiple state agencies using a single user ID and password. So you may already have a My Login account. Let's say that you've gone online to renew your driver's license or your plate tabs. Or for unemployment, Michigan Treasury Online. A lot of people already have that My Login. You can use that. And if you have a My Login Business or a My Login Citizen, it doesn't matter which, you can use either one. But if you are a state employee, you cannot use your My Login for Workers account. You will need to create a separate My Login for Citizens or My Login for Business. And another key thing to note is that BOE does not provide tech support directly to filers for setting up My Login accounts. That is a DTMB product and service, and they maintain, and there is an SOS, a Department of State help desk, but again, it's not within the BOE. And the number that we are providing on this page, the help desk phone number and that email address, is for the Department of State, which works with DTMB to provide that technical support directly for users. And we will need you to please reach out for My Login help through those numbers. We are not the IT experts on that, and chances are we won't be able to get you where you need to be as you would if you call or contact through those numbers. So with that, we're going to go into a demonstration that Bob is going to lead. And after we're done with that, we'll come back here and do a little wrap up and some question and answers.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Again, I'm Bob Burns. I'm the Director of the Disclosure, Filing, and Compliance Division. where we handle filing for office, petitions, campaign finance, lobby registration and reporting, and now the personal financial disclosure reporting. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Heidi, for advancing that slide. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how to add your personal financial disclosure link to the MyLogin. As Heidi already mentioned, MyLogin is generally handled by the Department of Technology Management and Budget, but I just wanted to add this little added item for how to add a link to your personal financial disclosure system. So after you establish your MyLogin, the first time a filer visits the MyLogin home screen, they'll need to place this link to MiTN on their MyLogin dashboard. And your dashboard will look a lot like what you see in front of you. It may have some links, some applications under the welcome screen, depending on what state services you've already used. But to add the MiTN state service on there, you'll click on Find Services on the right there under Discover Online Services. If you could advance the slide, please. That will take you to adding the personal financial services Discover Online Services page. There under Filter by Department, you'll select the checkbox next to Michigan Secretary of State applications. And then in the Search for Services search box, you can begin typing My Transparency Network until you see it on the list, which will show up in that the spyglass on the right. You'll read the terms and condition and then click Add Service. And then once you return to the MyLogin page as shown on the screen now, you'll see it shown up as personal financial disclosure link there right on the bottom. So now you can see and access the MiTN platform directly from your MyLogin. And once you've completed the step, you will not have to do it again. So now I'm going to go in and test our system and show our test system, show the registration, how to add a preparer, and just demonstrate some disclosures and file the reports. Just one moment while I share my screen. Okay, so now I am sharing my screen into basically what's our personal financial disclosure test environment. By going into the test environment, I can add in a little bit of information to demonstrate it for you without adding it into the actual system. Just as a note, when you get in here, you will also have to use the multi-factor authentication, which requires you to insert a text message code or a voicemail or a voice text code to get in. Let's see. As you'll see here, this will be the screen that anybody sees when they first get in. There'll be less information under the identifying information when you first start, but I'm going to show you how to navigate that real quick. So right here under identifying information summary, you'll see a button right now that says amend identifying information. When you first come in, it'll just have you add identifying information to that screen. So I'm going to click on that right now and show you what that looks like. So as you see on the screen, you're going to see a subway, what we call a subway map at the top of the screen. And this shows your progress through the registration process. In here, you see it already has my name in there, Robert Burns. And that now is updating the information automatically from your MyLogin. For those folks who might have got into the system very early, when we first launched last week, you had to actually insert that information, but now it is pulling that directly from MyLogin. So as you see, you'll just go through and input the filer address, If you have a second street number or apartment number, there's optional screens there. Email addresses. This is where you determine or put in whether you had a spouse at any point during the filing year or the reporting year. And once you get that done, you are going to hit save and next to keep this information. As you see at the top, it's continuing through the subway line and gone to the next stop of the subway and showing progress through the registration. We have to, at this point, we take in some of your current public officer information. This is to help identify you, make sure that you're submitting information appropriately, and helps the general public locate your information. In this case, I'm just putting some fictitious information in there that I'm a candidate for state senate. If I'm an elected office holder, it's going to ask you for some information, as well as your committee ID for your campaign finance. That's also to help us determine those folks who may not be required to file at this time. If you don't have a committee yet, and that's possible if you just filed for office and you're just a candidate, you would check that box and then hit save and next. If you have a preparer, this would be the screen where you add a preparer's information into there. Again, a preparer could be your accountant, it could be a staff person, often it might be a spouse. This information actually is not marked optional, but it is indeed optional. You do not have to have a preparer on there. That will be marked optional in future updates. When you get done with all your information, you'll click on the certification and hit submit. So now I've filled in a lot of what we call the identifying information. I'm just going to briefly show you if you want to add a preparer, in addition to their name you put in the identifying information, you need to invite them in order to have access to your reporting system. So to do that, you're going to plug their email into the enter the preparer box there. And this must be the email that is associated with their My Login for it to work. Now, in this case, I recommend using the My Login personal account. As many of you know, we do allow for the business account, and that was what was required when we initially launched. But I think it'll best work in the system if you use a personal account. The reminders, automatic links, and things will just be easier to find. And it also, if we use the personal account, it also happens to be the account that you use with other Secretary of State services. So there'll be some commonality there. So in this case, you'll enter your preparer, you'll hit the authorize button. And just so you know, in this blank space under the heading is where all of the authorized preparer's name will show up. In my case, I'm in a test environment, so I have not, we don't have any actual preparers in the system authorized just yet. So next, I am going to demonstrate some disclosures. Once you register, you'll see that you have made progress. You'll see the progress bar show up on your disclosure. In my case, you'll see I am 77% with my disclosure report. And that's because I have some sample data, and I'll show you there in a moment. I'm going to hit continue disclosures so I can continue to update my information. So what I'm going to show you today is just a couple examples. The earned income employer, the positions and organizations, and then the real property section. As you see on the screen, I have the employers and sources of earned income showed there combined into a single section here. And again, you'll see we have the subway line at the top with all stops on the subway that takes you to go through to submit a fully complete report. The subway line, just to note, will allow you some freedom to click in advance through the system, but will require you to go through each step of the process and save at least blank information in order to progress and to check off the box eventually. But I'll demonstrate that in a moment. So looking at employer and sources of earned income, as you can see on the top, I have that I am a direct employee of Stephen T. Mason, Attorneys at Law. That is a disclosure that I've already input into the system. As you can see, there is a edit button to the left, and if I scroll to the right, there's a delete button if I wanted to modify or eliminate that disclosure. So in order to modify or add additional disclosures, I first need to scroll down and unclick my attestation at the bottom. As you can see, all the fields are now available for me to use, and I can go through and adding in for some information. So in this case, in this screen, I can either put information for me, the filer, or my spouse. And as folks likely know, the acts do require all filers to include their spouse's employer and occupational information. And you would do this on the same screen. In this case, I'm just going to add another bit of information about myself. I happen to also be a contract employer for a fictitious company. I'm just going to call BOE Data Systems. Put that on there. In this case, I'm a analyst, and the position I hold is lead analyst. Now, in this case, as Heidi mentioned, we have optional fields in here. We did this in accordance with the acts, and you can skip this information if you want. But for instance, I may want to disclose that as a contractor, I actually do very little work for this BOE Data Systems. In fact, during the reporting year, I only made $2,000. So I'm going to put it in there, and just to disclose that. Then I'm going to move on and include address information for that contractual company. And then I'm going to scroll down. I will note that each of the pages with optional fields, we actually have this information right there that talks about why we've included optional fields on each of those pages. So next is one of the important things to do to save you some typing is, of course, save your information. And I'm going to save that right now. When I hit save, as you can see, it says disclosure saved on the screen in green and has added this additional disclosure under employers and sources of earned income on the screen there. As I mentioned, we could delete that information. We can edit that information by clicking there, and it'll allow you to edit right on the screen if you made a mistake or want to make a change, and then I hit save again. Once I'm done, I'm going to go back down. I'm going to attest that this information is true and accurate. I'm going to click on that and then hit save and next. Please ignore that error there. That's because I'm in a test environment. And then it's going to continue to the next screen, which is the next step on the subway line, which is earned income. Just to show another example, like going to the next one, positions and organizations, very similar. At the top, I've already input that I'm on the board of directors for an educational institution that I made up, the Detroit College of Medicine, which I think was the original name of Wayne State. If I wanted to add additional, of course, I would unclick that and add additional information. I'm not going to add anything else at this time, so I'm just going to hit save and next. And now I'm going to come to real property. Now, in this case, I may want to determine or show everybody that I actually don't own any real property. And you'll see at the bottom when something is blank, where I don't have any disclosures at the top, I have to click on, I do not have any real property disclosed. So I'm going to click on that and hit save and next. And then I'm going to continue each step through the subway line until I get to the end, which is demonstrating, which is a reviewing your disclosures and certification. I think it'll allow me to jump to that. Yeah. So we get to the last stop on the subway line, which is review and certification. You'll see that it shows all of the disclosures that I've input into the system. As I scroll down, you can see those. If I haven't completed an attestation on one of those pages, it's going to tell me that right at the bottom. And it shows that I didn't click on the attestation on blind trust. So I'm just going to click on that right now. Go down. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to hit save and next and save that to the system. I think it'll jump right back over. So if I re-review and look down, it looks like I'm totally complete. And now there's the certification that I believe Heidi mentioned earlier in the presentation. This is the certification that's in statute. This certification will not come up unless you are logged in as the filer, and it is the filer who should be clicking on this pursuant to the statute. So I'm going to click it right there, and I'm going to hit submit. And it says in my status that I have disclosed, I've submitted those disclosures. And as soon as I hit that, I want to let everybody know that it will be posted to the web for the public to review. Before I turn it back over to Heidi, I just wanted to mention a couple things. There are changes and improvements in the MiTN system ongoing. In addition to the big revision that'll take place at the end of the year, we are making some tweaks and improvements here and there. We've already made some adjustments to small errors that folks have brought to our attention, so I've appreciated those. We had a very short window to develop this system, so we might have missed testing a few items, so we appreciate everybody's feedback on that. And our developers got right on those and made improvements. So you may see updates from time to time. Our next update will be on Friday. Let's see. Also, I wanted to mention that the manual online, we are making improvements and additions to that as well. Most of the changes you see in there will be additions as we can add additional information. We'll be updating that and pushing it to the web. And there is a revision date on the front page of that if you want to make sure you have the most up-to-date version. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to Heidi, who will wrap up our presentation. And then we are going to go to Q&A.
Oops, I have to unmute myself. Thank you so much, Bob. And hold on, it was supposed to go to the end and it didn't. Sorry, guys. Okay, so there's just a couple of sort of cleanup kind of things that I want to make sure that I bring to your attention that are not directly, part of the current software. So once you are filed, there are a couple of additional requirements or obligations that could come up still here in 2024 or beyond. Are you guys seeing my screen okay?
I don't see anything, Heidi. It just looks black.
I see it.
Okay, great.
Okay. So if you're on as a BOE employee, I think you have two Teams screens. You might want to check the other one. So all filers in
sorry to interrupt, but we hear from the audience that they can't see your screen.
Oh, huh. Okay. Then that is not the case. I wonder why these last couple of slides they're so minor. I'm just gonna
they're seeing it now, so we're good now. Must have been a pause.
Oh, I wonder if it's because I scrolled through them so quickly that it took a little while to catch up. So, okay, sorry about that, guys. There's always that little technical something, right? So in 2024, once you're filed, you might actually still have some additional requirements. So I just want to bring to your attention that a public officer is required to file a response under the act if they receive a notice from Secretary of State with regarding any errors or omissions. Or if filed late, there could be fines that would be issued and need to be paid. So you would have an obligation to those as well. There's also a public officer who is not running again. If you're not on the ballot, so whether you're term limited, whether you're gonna, go run for local office, whatever the situation may be, you're just retiring. Doesn't matter. But if you are entering into any employment agreement or arrangement for future employment, you need to disclose that within 10 days after entering into that agreement. And then for the rest of the candidates and public officers, you will need to reevaluate in 2025 and beyond whether you continue to owe personal financial disclosure reports based on whether you are still a candidate for office and or a public officer. And then there's also, as I mentioned, you may have an obligation to respond to an error and omission. The staff will be reviewing, which is right at this point, it's like me and Bob. So, we will be reviewing the staff reviews for timeliness, completeness, and accuracy, and issue any error and omission notices as needed. And then there could be fees. It's a daily fee for every day that a report is late, up to a maximum of $1,000. And then up to $500. But there's also potentially civil fines. If, let's say, someone decides that they're going to submit a wholly incomplete or inaccurate report, something, that would rise to, to that level, it could be a civil fine. There's also a complaint process. So if a complaint were filed, you would be expected to cooperate with a response to the Bureau, and they will, and our regulatory team will be taking care of any complaints and looking into those. That complaint process is fairly identical to the complaint process that is used currently for campaign finance. So if you go to our PFD website, you will see the links for filing a complaint or to see what complaints have been determined. And then finally, there's declaratory rulings and interpretive statements. So there are going to be things that are not yet clear or clarified across the entire PFD spectrum. And those will develop over time through those declaratory rulings and interpretive statements. So we strongly encourage you to check those out, follow them, and even submit a request for a declaratory ruling where you feel there needs to be additional clarification or some type of an understanding. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for attending,